Coming up on The Returned.
Look back and my body didn't follow me. Oh my God, have I died? And instantly I'm thrust up through a kaleidoscope of colors. I'm in the blackness of the universe. What just happened?
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. The truth always follows you back. Hi, and welcome to The Return, a place where we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and lightworkers from around the world. Today, I have been waiting for this moment. You know, you guys, I know I say this all the time, but I am honored to be sitting here right now with Darnella Ford. She is an author of 5 best-selling novels, recognized as the best new voice 2003. Darnella began experiencing spontaneous out-of-body journeys, experiences that have continued nearly 2 decades. She has left the body and returned again and again.
Thank you so much, Melina, for having me on the podcast. It's always an honor to connect. I look forward to an amazing conversation today. And I always want to say thank you to the viewers. Always want to acknowledge the viewers. Thank you for tuning in.
Darnella, before we talk about the experiences, I always like to begin by grounding us in who someone was basically before everything changed in their life. So before 2006, did spirituality or religion play a role in your life at that time?
Wow, what a great question. Thank you. What a beautiful place to enter this conversation. I always say I feel like I came here wired for God. I was always interested in God. And of course, I came through the traditional, heavily indoctrinated. We started out as Baptists and we converted to Catholicism and went to Catholic school. And then my aunts were Jehovah's Witnesses. So then I converted to Jehovah's Witness and practiced that for 7 years. Very intense, devout witness, knocking on doors, selling Watchtower and Awake magazines. So I had a lot of religion. And then, of course, I fell from grace and was kicked out of the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses for all my sins and shortcomings. And then I went into kind of like an existential crisis because everything was God. And then all of a sudden there was no more God because I was no longer a part of the group. It was very traumatizing, very traumatic. So I grew up with faith and religion and God. And then I wandered for many years when I moved to Los Angeles, faithless. I didn't have God. I didn't have a God. And so I turned to very worldly pursuits and really devoted my time to success and career and my work and my writing. And I was out here in Los Angeles running amok and running wild. So, before 2006, I would say it was probably one of the darker periods of my life, just because there was no faith. I didn't have there's nothing. The faith for me was success, money, notoriety, achieving goals. That was my God. Yeah.
Mm,
But
mhm.
that all would soon change in 2006. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that shifted the whole course of your life. And that
Whole course.
was a heartbreak that
It
became the
was.
catalyst for.
Oh my gosh. Yes, this
Yeah.
this man who was interested in actor, he was in the industry. He still isn't in the industry. And you couldn't have told me that this was the man. You see somebody and get connected with someone, you just know this is my person. Such a deep connection. And he really was my best friend. And so we went on one date and he moved in to my house after the first date. So high intensity, super high octane, high living on the edge. And when that ended, I crashed because I was hanging out there really on the bitter edge of existence. in this thing called love, and went through such a just fell into the well of deep depression, which I had struggled with my whole life. Depression was always a constant companion. Anxiety, depression, neuroses, all of those things were constant. But it really exasperated after this breakup. And I found myself really in a really broken state. But it inspired me to reach for something more than myself. Call it God, call it light, love, call it whatever you would call it. But I did reach for it. And I started having some very interesting experiences in the search to discover me. And one night I remember specifically asking on a piece of paper, "Who am I?" I wrote it down, which is very interesting. Sitting in my living room one night, I said, "Who am I?" And then I wrote it down again, "Who am I?" And then I stood up in my living room, like almost demanding, "Who am I?" And screaming it to the top of my lungs. What possessed me to do this? I don't know. But the next moment, I was out of my body and in the complete darkness, just a complete void. And I saw light. I saw a sparkle of light, and then instantly I was back in this reality. So it was like within a microsecond, I bleeped out, and then I bleeped back in. And I said, "I'm light? I'm light?" I had no point of reference for that. I had no point of reference for that. That was really one of the very first unique things that happened before my out of body experiences started.
I wanted to ask a bit about your relationships. Um, it's funny how we say this is the person and we get excited, then we're broken. What would you
Yeah.
say if I said to you, maybe he was the person at
You
that
know,
time for you?
I'm going to tell you this. I would say that resonates because when I met him and he met me, and the way that we met, and he was trying to go somewhere else, and I was trying to go somewhere else, and we ended up meeting. Like I wasn't supposed to be where I was, and neither was he. And we knew I knew it was strange. I think he was absolutely. I have absolutely no doubt on a spiritual level. He and I made a contract because when we connected and we went out one time, it was like we'd known each other through infinity, and that it seemed really sudden, right, that he would move in with me on the first date, but it really felt as natural as breathing. It never, ever felt weird or odd that we jumped right in. I mean, he was the alpha and the omega. He was the beginning and the end. He was my breath. And I can feel into the feeling of being in that relationship with him. Never have I had a relationship quite like that. It was the highest high, but it was also the lowest low. And when it ended, it was almost like I didn't know where I began anymore because we were, I was so enmeshed. I felt like I no longer existed outside of him and us. Right. And it really sent me into a place. I cried every day for 9 months. I mean, I literally thought I'm never gonna ever stop crying. Every day I would just and everybody would say, "Oh, here she's crying again." Like all my friends, like, "Oh my God." Remember one of my friends said, "Girl, are you still crying over this bit?" I could not find I could not find the end of my tears. I couldn't find them. And I thought I'm never gonna be okay. I mean, that's how I know that sounds so dramatic looking back, but when I was in it, I always say I would never wish this on anybody. I would never wish anybody in that kind of I was in so much pain. But this relationship is now one of the most sacred experiences I've ever had because it broke me wide open. And I mean, it forced me into the deepest well inside of myself. It brought me all the way back to myself. It brought me all the way back to point zero. It brought me back to that which was even before I was even born. So that's how much despair, when you're in that much despair, somebody could take you out to a cow pasture and say, eat all this cow manure. I would have said, okay, is it going to make me feel better? Get me a plate and a knife and a fork and let's get into it. I was that desperate. But from that great desperation, something in I mean, honestly, I look back on it, it was one of the most sacred times of my life. And even though it was incredibly painful, but it was so purposeful. I would not be who I am today without that moment.
That's exactly what I was getting at,
Yeah.
right? You kind of have to go through that for whatever reason, but you do feel that it was planned?
I would think because of the way that my life changed after meeting him and the direction that my life I mean, I went from someone that was pursuing the ranks of rising in Hollywood with my writing and, had book deal and book tour and traveling around, met Oprah. I was really climbing, like really climbing that ladder, like really actively on the journey. And I mean, just all a warrior for success. And next thing I knew, I'm leaving Los Angeles. I'm going to Washington. I'm up in the mountains. I'm studying quantum physics and neuroscience and neurobiology and meditation. And what in the world happened to me? It was like someone snatched me up out of my body and put somebody else in there in place of me. And that
Did
was
they?
the path that I wanted to that was the path that I wanted to go, you know? Thermodynamic energy, I'm studying thermodynamics. So I went through a really profound, very strange metamorphosis, which created a lot of depression because what I knew as my identity I mean, I was Darnella the writer, I was Darnella the entertainer, I was a spoken word artist, I was touring around the country, performing. I only knew myself as that. I only knew myself as Darnella, the artist, the entertainer, the writer, the author, the award-winning novel. I only knew myself as that. Nothing else existed. Nothing else mattered. Nothing else mattered to me. That was it. Now I'm studying the observer effect and Schrodinger's cat, and I'm studying Einstein's theories of relativity. I'm like, who is this girl? And why do I even care? Right. But in that time I did care. Something was happening inside of me that was changing me in a very profound way.
So you went through that dark time,
Yeah.
almost like an extended dark night of the soul, right?
Yes.
Which is
Yes.
fine, right? So everybody's
Yes.
different. So, but that first out of body, was that the one that set your soul on fire?
That was the first experience I had, but I didn't even know to call that out of body. So I never even identified that as out of body. My real first out of body happened several months later when I got up to go to the bathroom one night and I looked back and my body didn't follow me. And I thought, oh my God, have I died? Because I see me sleeping on the couch, but yet here I am. So who is the me that's looking back at this form that I know to be me? And then instantly I'm thrust up through a kaleidoscope of colors and into another dimension of a void. And I'm in the blackness of the universe. It's like the black starry night. It was an incredible experience. And then I was back in my body and then I sat straight up. I was on the couch actually. And I said, what just happened? Then that ignited in me this burning question to understand what just happened and what did I just see? And my part of my brain wanted to say this isn't real. This wasn't real. But yet I knew it wasn't a dream. But I couldn't reconcile what it was. If it's not a dream, and I'm part of me telling myself that's not real, but yet it actually happened, I had to reconcile. The word near death experience was not on top of tongue in 2006. Out of body experiences, people were not having those just conversations in general, everyday waking rooms, at least not the rooms I was standing in, not the world I was living in, the very 3D material reality world I was living in. I didn't know anybody that was having these kind of experiences. So I began to do a deep dive into out of body experiences, start studying, Robert Monroe
Yeah.
and William Bowman and all of these amazing and started studying a lot of channeled material. Started studying Jane Roberts and Seth and Abraham Hicks, and I started studying, channel teachings, and that's how it all began for me.
What an interesting start.
Yeah, it was
You
a really
went from
interesting start.
one right to the dead opposite.
And you know what? I want to say something to that, Melina, because it happened so quickly. It happened so quickly, and literally overnight, I became clairaudient, clairsentient, all of it overnight happened to the point where I felt like I was having a nervous breakdown because all of a sudden, everything opened. And I didn't have a point of reference. I mean, I think take the average human being walking around. If you flip the world upside down, what they believe is 3D reality, all of a sudden one day they could see into other dimensions. All of a sudden one day they could connect with other beings on the other side of it. If you don't have a point of reference to that, you think you're going crazy, you've lost your mind, you've gone mad. This is not something that I grew up with. This wasn't normal. This was definitely a no-no in the world of religion, all considered demonic. Right? So I didn't have a point of reference for anything good being this experience. This was not good to me. And I was very worried and I was very depressed and I was very concerned about my mind. I was very, very concerned that I could hear people or hear beings and I was getting messages and receiving messages and was seeing things and feeling things and I was very concerned about my mental health. Very, very. I've never been so concerned in my life about my
Yeah,
mental
that
health.
so how did you start getting that? So was it the out of body? Was it the
It all it
emotion?
all it all literally started at the same time. After that out of body, it all happened, and then like, literally, I could feel like I could pinpoint a Friday evening sitting on my sofa and a being entering my room and literally merging with me, taking over my vocal cords and my thoughts and communicating to me, giving me downloads. I had no point of reference for what this was. It was the most terrifying and the most exciting thing I'd ever experienced. And it wasn't me. Like it wasn't me. And from that night, the being said to me something I'll never forget. Said, you want to see what time is? I said, okay, sure. Why not? The being said, blink. Now, Melina, it was 9 o'clock at night, between 9 and 10 p.m. I blinked. Like if I tell you to blink right now, I opened my eyes in a microsecond. It was 8 in the morning. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. And I freaked out. I jumped up off the couch. What happened to the night? What happened to the night? It was time for me to get up and start my day. I hadn't even been to sleep. And I'm like, wait a minute. What in the what? That was the hardest day because I thought, okay, I have officially crossed over to the other side. This is how people end up hospitalized and sedated. And this is where I'm on my way to. Sedation and medication.
I had an
I
outer body experience once. And I wasn't anywhere near that, but I had woken up on the other side of the room. But when I was looking across at myself, I was on the other side of the room on the couch. My real body sat up, but so did something else
yes.
while I was watching it. And there was like almost like so three perspectives. So me
Okay.
and then
I've had
over
that
there.
before. I've had that
Oh
before.
man,
Okay. I've
that's
never heard anybody
scary.
else say that. I've had that exact thing before. Because it's so multidimensional, you can have, right? You're aware of all three at the same time. I absolutely have had that experience. Not even that long ago, I had that experience.
It was enough for me, okay? I'll tell you, I got back in
No,
that
it
body
can
so quick just
it
with a boom because I got really nervous, like, what's going
no,
on here?
it can make you feel, honest to goodness, it can make you feel, and I did. I mean, I don't even share this on podcast, but since we're having such an honest conversation, I drove myself. It sounds so funny in reflection, but it wasn't funny at the time. I drove myself. It's 2007. I drove myself to the emergency room and I went in the ER and I told the people, check my brain for a tumor because I believe I have a brain tumor. And of course, they literally go and it was like, where was the compassion? Where was the compassion at Encino Hospital? They looked at me like I was crazy and they tested me for drugs. They said she's probably on something. Obviously, never taken a drug a day in my life.
Mm.
And it was very interesting because while they were in the middle of like doing this examination that they really thought they didn't take seriously, I left my body. I left my body. And when I came to, there was a room full of doctors that were just all in front of me staring at me. They were just in shock. And they're like, okay, something's happening. So then they said, let's order some MRIs. They took hundreds of pictures of my brain. At the end of it, by the way, they said, we want to keep you overnight for observation. It kept me 2 days to study my brain. At the end of it, $30,000 later, do you know what they said? You are in a deep state of transcendental meditation. That's what's happening to you. That was their $30,000 diagnosis. Transcendental meditation, they said the patient is consciously removing her spirit from this realm and putting it somewhere else. They literally put that in the paperwork. Not the American doctors. There was a doctor that they called from UCLA that was from India, from another country or something, and he said that's what's happening. She's in a state of trance. She's traveling. $30,000, please. She's traveling. And when I left out of there, I was at the lowest because that didn't help me. That didn't help. What am I to do with that? I'm traveling. What does that even mean? First of all, I'd never even heard of transcendental meditation. What even is that? But they're saying I'm doing this proficiently. People pay lots of money to learn how to do this. I later learned. And I'm doing it proficiently, how I'd never had a class. So that was the beginning. I'll tell you, it was a literal waking nightmare. And it was not pleasant. It was terrifying. I had nobody to talk to about this. None of my friends were in anything this weird. And I had to find a tribe. I had to find teachers. I had to find someone to help me make sense of these experiences that I was having.
Wow. And $30,000 later. Wow.
30,000, yeah, to take some pictures of my head.
Unbelievable. So, I kind of want to go in this direction just for a minute. So,
Sure.
I know because many people listening are familiar with near death experiences, but
Yes.
your story, obviously, because your body wasn't dying, so it's completely
No.
different. So,
Guaranteed.
if you could kindly, from your perspective, kind of tell us, how do out of body experiences differ from near death experience, minus
Right.
the dying part?
Right, absolutely. So basically, a near death experience is oftentimes induced by a level of trauma, whether that would be an accident or heart attack, a hemorrhage, an aneurysm, an overdose, alcohol poisoning, seizure, or any other combination of illness and trauma to the body that forces the consciousness or the spirit to eject itself from the body. It can happen in the blink of an eye, like in a car accident, and the person is above the body, or a heart attack before the person even hits the ground, they're out of the body. Okay. Now, an out of body experience doesn't necessarily induce by trauma. What is it? If people want to know what does induce an out of body experience, well, that's where it gets really tricky because so many people want to have them. So many people are trying to have them. So many people take classes and try to induce them. I have a very unique take on that because I believe one, we all have them in our lifetime, but just the individual consciousness is not recognized to track it. The brain always tracks, but we don't have the consciousness. So it just seems like you go to sleep and wake up. And a lot of times people have them and they don't know they're actually having them. Or they may have glimpses and bleeps of things that seem incoherent to the reality that they know. They don't realize to frame it as an out of body, right? So I think a lot more people have them than they're even aware of. But for me, it happened spontaneously when I was studying quantum physics in Washington. And I was doing a series of breath work and very faithful, very like almost holotropic, really intense breath work. So I was creating massive shifts in consciousness, altered awareness through breath work. And then through that opening, that created, I believe, the avenue for my consciousness to expand in a way that I became aware of it. And then I began to study it specifically to learn what happened and what it was, and I began to practice it. So I became more proficient after practicing for a year every single day. So for me, it was an intentional field of study led by the inspiration of just being fascinated as to what is this? What is this? But then when I started doing it consistently, I was getting information and learning things that were actually beneficial to my everyday waking life. So then I started taking on becoming a student to the teachers in the out of body experience or in the non-physical realm. So then I started connecting with my teachers on the other side of the veil, wonderful teachers. And it became a way of life. It was like me continuing my education, but my school that I went to, which just happened to be in the non-physical, it wasn't in the physical. But it was really just a continuation of education. So I always felt like my out of body experiences were very purposeful and meaningful for what I was learning and evolving and growing into. And I've always said if people want to have them, it's very important to have, to me, this is just my opinion, to have an intention and to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because it's not necessarily about having the out of body experience. I've always said it's the ability to be able to ground and integrate that experience into this life, because this is the one you have more conscious recall of in the living of it on a day to day basis. So it's wonderful to be able to travel to the stars, but you have to understand one, why am I there? What is the purpose and the intention of that travel? And how will that impact me in my everyday life? Because the last thing you want to do is travel and not be able to integrate it, because that can create a fracture in your psyche and your consciousness in a very dangerous way. So you may want to make sure, because if you're just out there in the ethers and you're not grounded, your energy's not grounded in your body, it could create some potential complications in your waking life, in your everyday waking life.
So that's awesome because I've heard a few things about out of body experience. It's very fascinating for me. It's something I'm now just starting to really look into. I've had my own near death experience, and back
Yes.
then when I had it, I only had like I didn't really have a name for it when I had it. Uh, but it fascinated me, and that's when I started learning about the near or the out of body experiences from all the shows on YouTube.
Oh, yes.
Kept
Oh,
going,
yes. Oh,
but anyway,
yes.
there's so much learning that you can do on YouTube. It blows my mind. All you
Yes.
channels, all it's endless, endless.
Yes.
However, when I am very curious, so outside of your body, we are us. We are a spirit, correct? And
Yes.
our human bodies here, and we're out of the physical world completely.
Yes.
And so, how does it differ? Like, does it look like here? Does it
Well,
feel like here?
okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so what's really wild is I've had so many different kinds of experiences. Depends on what realm you go to, is depending on what it looks like, right? They have realms that are so breathtaking. You can't imagine in the most beautiful postcard picture. I have been into realms where the beauty is so it's it's almost blistering. It literally pulls the breath from me, because to see something so beautiful, right? So I have experienced things like that. I've experienced realms. I've experienced a realm, what I consider a realm in the future, where none of the buildings have, and everything is like circled. They don't have any angles. Everything, all the architecture is circular. I've experienced a realm where the ground is just pink sand. Everything is pink. I've experienced realms where it's underwater and they breathe underwater, but the breath is music. Music is brought in through the lungs, and that is the breath of the people. So it depends on what it's as fantastic as your brain can even fathom. And then there are some, yeah, absolutely, some places that will look like a nice countryside or an open meadow or a valley or an ocean, a water, beautiful water. One thing I've always felt like everything is much sharper, much more clear, and they don't have this concept of decomposition and decay that we do here. So that's why things look alive because they are alive. And the light filaments light through the everything is living energy. The grass is living energy, the rock is living energy, and it doesn't have decomposition or decay. So it is literally alive. Those would be the most notable distinctions that I would say between that realm, those realms, and our physical realm. Now, interestingly, there are realms that have a physical feel to them, meaning I can open a door and it feels like a door here. Or I can walk through a door and I can feel the literal atoms as I'm passing through it. That's a very odd sensation, hard to explain. I've had both experiences. One where I've held the door, put my hand on the door, opened the doorknob, walked through a door, an actual structure that looks like a door here. And another, in another out of body, where I passed through the walls, where I passed through it and felt the actual molecular and atomic structure moving through me as I passed through it. So I've had both experiences, seemingly physical and solid, and also quite atomic, subatomic by nature particles.
That is so hard to imagine, you know? So if
It's
I was to ask you, like, so say the spirit realm or the astral, if you may, can we get there? Can you go there?
so it goes back again to what the purpose and the reason.
Mhm.
I find that I don't sweat myself or pressure myself to have these experiences because I know exactly when I'm supposed to, I have them. It just it's always divinely timed and it's all perfect. It's always I trust the timing of it. And it's always purposeful and meaningful because when I go, I see things that I need to see in the moment. So I can go anywhere. Now, what's interesting is I don't necessarily say I can will myself because I've been to some places that I've wanted to go back to, and I've never been able to will myself back to these places. So, can I go anywhere? Theoretically, but when I set my intention on going back somewhere, I've been to places I've begged to go back to, and I've never been able to go back. Matter of fact, case in point, a few months ago, I came out of my body and so for me, it's different now. Before it used to be the whole lift off and the whole body shaking and you feel the frequency and it's noisy and you rise. That was the beginning. Now I don't have that experience anymore because of the amount of time I have traveled. Now I just blink. I blink from one dimension to the other. So for me, there's no more lift off. There's none of that. I don't register it in that way. It's just my attention is here and it blinks and I'm in another. It's just like that. So for me, I'm in the physical. I fall asleep, right? I fall asleep. I blink and I'm in another, and then I'm fully awake in another dimension, fully awake, fully aware, 100%. And I have to orientate to one, is this a dimension that has structure and form? Some dimensions that I've, structure and form, a wall, a house, a lake, a mountain, a valley, or is this a dimension where there is no structure or form, blackness, indistinguishable, boundaryless space, right? So I'm always orientating to where am I? And then secondarily, who am I meeting? Who's appearing before me? Is it an extraterrestrial? Is it a deceased loved one? Is it a future? I've met my future self, by the way. I've had an experience where I met my future self. I've met my quote past self. And I've met myself experiencing all of these at the same time, right? Outside the boundaries of space and time. There is no time, right? So when that frame collapses and there's no more distinguishable past, present, future. So for me, it's simply being here and then bleeping into another realm and then orientating myself immediately as to what kind of realm am I in. Is it form? Is it formless? What kind of beings are here? Who is this here? Who's meeting me? Are they guides? Are they teachers? Am I meeting my fear here? Am I afraid? All of it. So those that's how I process my experiences.
Yes. Sorry, you go ahead. You go right
I
ahead.
wanted to say what I was meaning to say before I got all off into that big tangent was when I bleeped out from one realm into the other 3 months ago, I was in the land. I simply call it the land of giants. And these were real beings. They were human, they looked human, right? Now here was the interesting thing. I was above them. I was never allowed to touch the ground in this realm. I was only allowed to perceive it from above. So I can't tell you in relationship to my height. I'm 5 feet 5 inches tall. I don't know how tall they were, but I could tell from my observation they were like 16, 20 feet, the women and the men, and they had very long arms, very long legs. They wore like very like what I would call holy clothes, tunics, and the way they were dressed, they wore fine silk garments. And when I ended up in this space, there was something happening in this place. It reminded me a little bit of an Amish countryside. That's what it looked like. They were very like think Amish, think very natural world, think country, think, and they were all walking. They were all walking to some central gathering. There was something that was happening here, something ceremonial, sacred. I don't know what it was, but everybody from the whole town was convening. So, from my vantage point, I could see all of these incredible, giant people, and I was in awe. But here's the cool thing about it: I could feel the vibration. It was a very peaceful community, very beautiful community, and I was simply in awe then why would I get a chance to perceive something this incredible? I was in awe that I could see it. I was in awe that I was experiencing it. And I felt myself wanting to go to the I really wanted to go to the sacred gathering or whatever, but I was not invited. So I was not going, but I wanted to. And I hung out as long as I could. And then I was back in the body. Now, for the next 3 nights, guess who tried to go back? But I was not allowed, and I've never forgotten them. I don't know that I'll ever have that experience again, but boy, it's imprinted in me that I just got a chance to even perceive it one time. It was beautiful.
I'm
It was
wondering
beautiful.
about how it differs from a dream state. So, lucid dreaming. When I dream, I am always somewhere else. I am gathering little tokens, or I'm receiving
Yeah.
messages, or all these different things, but it's very crystal clear. But the thing is, the reason I'm asking this is because when I fall asleep, it feels like I'm coming out of my I know this sounds strange, but I feel like I'm in a V shape and I come out through my butt area. It's the weirdest thing.
Okay.
It feels like
Okay.
through the mattress.
Okay. I have come out
You know what I
well,
mean?
I've come out in every kind of way, but I've fallen through the mat. That's my least favorite way to come out. I've fallen through my chest. I don't like to come out that way because it's very disorientating. Um, I would also come up through the top of my head. I'd also come up through the bottom of my feet. I'd also come up feet first. I also float up to the ceiling. But now I don't come out any of those ways. Now it is just I stopped coming. I no longer have the sensation of coming out. There's no more coming out. I just go from one dimension to the next. How you come out, I believe, can create a little bit of disorientation. And if you come out multiple ways, you can explore, oh, coming out through the top of my head, or falling through my chest, or coming up through my feet upside down. Like there's so many different ways, and you can explore the different ways that you come out. I never expressed a preference, except the only thing I did express was I never want to come out through my chest and fall through the mattress. Don't like that. So, and then I was very adamant about that. So I never had that again. And eventually, once I became super proficient at it, now it's just there's not even need to go through all that.
So
And if
is
it's
that a type of out of body then?
what you're
Like when you're
experiencing.
going into your deep dream state, like very lucid, like where it's almost like real?
Yeah, it's so I mean, and that's always that's always the great question is what's the difference between lucid dream and out of body? And people will give you lots of different I've heard all sorts of different things. For me, I say this. I have dreams, dream vision. What I like to believe as my reflection on it now, I am becoming aware in an expanded state of consciousness of that which is greater than the story of my life, the narrative that I have here. So it's as real. The dreams, the lucid dreams, all that to me is as real as the life that you're having here. You're expanding in consciousness to take in a greater picture. It's how I perceive. That's just how I perceive it. Now, the difference for me is I always say the fullness of it because I become completely conscious in my full awareness, in my full awareness of elsewhere. That means I can that means I can think, not just think, but my senses are heightened and I'm also aware not that I am in a dream, but that I am fully present here in another realm. It's a different level of awareness,
Okay.
right? I'm not even questioning, oh my God, am I dreaming? It's
Mhm.
like, no, I'm in the fullness of my consciousness in a much more heightened state of awakeness in this frame of reality. And it's just an absolute knowing. It's an absolute knowing. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense? It's kinda like
Oh,
like
absolutely.
like right now, I'm sitting here at the coffee shop. I know I'm here, right? I know I'm not in my living room, right? How do you know you're here, Janelle? How do you know you're not in your living room? Well, because the fullness of me and all of my attention and interaction is happening right here, and with you in front of me, right? So I feel like the fullness of me, at least in my human form, is here present with you. Versus there could potentially be a fragmentation of me in my living room right now doing something else. That is quite possible. If you look at parallel realities, it's probably probable, right? But the fullness of this moment that I'm collapsing into reality in this now moment is right here. And that's what it feels like for me. It's like I'm aware that I have a living room. I'm aware that I have a body, but the fullness of me is outside of it in another realm. And I'm also fully aware of that. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Totally does.
Okay, good.
So I wanted to go off on a different trajectory here.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
earlier you spoke of, sorry, you spoke about meeting non-human teacher.
Yes.
And I wanted to touch a bit on that. I would like
Okay.
to know what that means to you and how do they communicate or how do they teach you?
Yes, thank you for asking. When I say non-human teachers, some of them will take on human form, but I don't know that that's their true form. Some of them may do that so that I feel comfortable. I have had teachers in the form of dragons. I know that sounds crazy, but okay, a dragon, a lady that transformed into a dragon, showing me metamorphosis, a shape shifting. I've had reptilian beings appear, extraterrestrials, beings that were not identifiable to me based upon what they were presenting as, things that I had no form of reference to know even what to call it, right? Other than extraterrestrial or reptilian or a dinosaur or a dragon. I've also had teachers in the form of, now this is where we're going to go a little bit further out. We're going to expand a little bit more. I've had teachers that were mathematical equations. I had teachers that were musical notes. I had teachers that were symphonies. They were pumping. It's so once you start going there, you're going beyond language. I don't know how to language that. I don't know how to language it. I had teachers that were light. They had no form. They were just simply light. I had teachers that had no body, no form, but projected thoughts into my mind in the form of their own voice. And so there's no, again, once again, now we're outside the realm of language in terms of linear processing of student teacher, right? Subject verb. We're outside of that now. So how do I express that in a way that you could grasp it? or your viewers can grasp it of what I'm saying. Because how does a music note teach you? But yet a music note taught me. A music note taught me. Isn't that interesting? Taught
It
me
sounds
harmony.
very vast.
It sounds very vast. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, that's a good word for it.
I think it's beyond human consumption.
It is, and it's and so imagine trying to put the boundary and border of language around it.
Mm.
It's like I'm trying to, and I'm realizing when you're asking me questions, I'm speaking to you like a human to a human. I'm speaking to you and the viewers from us from this human experience, but I'm trying to find language to describe that which is not human to us as human, right? So I'm trying to, use my imagination and my vocabulary, and I'm trying to ground it with the sensorial sensation of what I experience and my senses of it to make it all make sense. And I know, I mean, listen, Melina, at the end of the day, to many people, this is going to sound like some type of fantastic tale. And there'll be no point of reference or what the hell is she talking about? Um, yeah, and I get that. And that's why these things can be so, this can be so, so difficult to explain these kind of things.
Let me ask you this. This is just coming to mind. Why, like, how do I say this? Why do I feel like, and this is how I'm going to say it just at right now. Why do I feel like this is something that's been hidden from humanity for a very long time? That's how I'm getting it out to you. But for some reason, are we? Weren't we all supposed to have these types of gifts?
Well, well, here's something, darling. I mean, listen, I'm not special. I'm not. What I can do, you can do, anyone can potentially do. But I will say this, physical reality by the nature of what it is a highly focused system of experience. That means all hands on deck, all consciousness focused. It's a highly focused system to participate here. And it's designed that way, right? Because you can't be fully grounded here and be all off into the ethers. And I did struggle with that. And I still sometimes do because I do live very much I'm in two worlds. I am really, when I say I'm in between two worlds, what I have in my brain as to what I've seen and what I've registered, which human does not have it. So I have to balance that between going to the store and buying bananas. I have to justify running alongside dinosaurs and buying a sack of potatoes. How do you do that, right? But nonetheless, unless you're going to have a psychic split and you're going to end up in a mental institution, you have to find a way to blend, to blend. And to honor the divine part of us and the human part of us. So yes, we all have the potential, but we live in a very structured, highly physically focused dimension of time, space, and distance. It's a very rigorous system the way this system is set up here, and it takes a lot of focus to be able to maintain it. And plus, I think too, you know, if people were having these all kinds of experiences, how would they ground them? And you have to ask something too, Melina. Does the average person have the mental health? And I'm listen. I'm not trying to say that even I have it fully. Does the average person have the mental health that they can split themselves between dimensions? The average person doesn't even have the mental health to be here in one dimension, in this three-dimensional reality. People are going crazy. So expand that into other realms. So that's why I always say proceed with caution. This is our birthright. We are divine. But are we meant to do this level? Is the average person meant to do this level of exploration? I don't know that. As a matter of fact, I would tend to say unless it directly relates to their life purpose, why would they even want to? Unless it relate because it's not all I think I want to ground it here for your viewers and for you. It's not all roses, rainbows, and unicorns having these experiences because you can have some experiences that shake you to the core of your existence. And that's not to put fear into people, but you can meet things that you're not ready to meet. So I'm always an advocate of grounding, balance, and mental health first, first and foremost, because this is not like some video game and we're just going to start exploring with traveling here, there, and everywhere. And I think sometimes people can be a little frivolous in how they view it. Oh, I just want to go to the land of giants, or I want to do these things. But I think everything is purposeful. And I think not to encourage or discourage anyone from doing it, but you have to do it with intention. That's my humble thought, right? That's my humble, you know, everything has a reason and a meaning. And just to say, I want to get out of my body and I want to go, the question would first be why? First of all, why? What's the purpose? What do you intend to do with the information? How will you integrate that into your everyday life? What will that mean for your relationships, your dreams to yourself? And some people want to help themselves here by understanding more about the other side. I think that's very valid. You can learn a lot more about how to maneuver in this system of reality. And that can be very helpful. But I'm just a fan of approaching everything with intention and not approaching it almost like a carnival trick,
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes in these rooms it becomes more of a carnival trick. And I don't advocate respectfully, it's respectfully learning this. This is part of our birthright. It's kind of like this. I look at it as, you know, if you're a woman and you're born with all of your parts intact, you can potentially reproduce, right? You can have a baby, right? You have a functioning reproductive system. You can have a baby, right? But just because it's your birthright and you're born with the anatomy to do it, doesn't mean you should be having a baby at 13 or at 14. You understand? So
Mhm.
the thing is, it's our birthright to do this, but it doesn't mean just because it's our birthright that we're in the right place at the right time to expand this, right? You may not be in the right place at the right time to expand life beyond your own to reproduce. You might be 12 years old and in eighth grade. And really, should you be having a baby at 12? You understand what I'm saying? So I think people get a little bit confused. What's my birthright? I'm a divine being. Yeah, you are a divine being, but timing is everything. So I caution people. And I know sometimes people don't like that. They feel like, you do it. I should be able to do it. You can do it. You have the equipment for it. You're a divine being. But intention, life plays. I'm going to go back to mental health and mental stability. What your why is, that all plays a part into the quality of the experience that you're going to have. That's my humble opinion, and no one has to agree. That's just my opinion from doing this for 20 years.
And I agree. I know that there's a lot of people teaching this out there right now, and kudos to them, and and the people that are wanting to do this.
Yeah,
I agree that
yeah,
you have in a set intention. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
I want to focus back on you for a moment and returning from these journeys over almost 2 decades. Now, did you ever bring back specific insight or understanding that completely changed how you see life here?
Yes. Oh my God. The answer to that would be absolutely yes. And I'm trying to think some of the experiences I can give you. One of the very first lessons I was ever taught was taught to me by the teacher with no body, only the voice through mental projection into my mind. The teacher said, everything that you believe, this is my very first lesson. I'll never forget it. Everything you believe, everything that you hold consciously and unconsciously, I will capture it and I will reflect it back to you. That was my first lesson. I sat straight up on my couch, wrote it down, came back into my body, wrote it down. That was 2006. That was my first lesson. Everything that you hold in your belief system, conscious or unconscious, I will capture. Now, who was it that said that? Take a guess. I don't know. I will capture it and reflect it back to you. So then I knew 100% that what I was meeting was a projection of my own thoughts, conscious and unconscious belief systems. So that was one. Oh my God. One of my favorite lessons. The woman who appeared in my bedroom went from a She went from like a Puritan looking woman with an apron and a broom. She turned into a dragon. And she said, it doesn't matter if you stay or go. All that matters is that you love. It doesn't matter if you stay or go. And she sent it to me energetically, sharper translation than the words. And I knew that to be truth. Had an experience March 1st, so a couple weeks ago, laid down, took a nap. In the middle of a nap, instantly out of my body, I saw a good friend of mine who's on hospice now. I watched her transition. I watched her family grieve and weep. I was singing to her as she was transitioning, and I saw her leave her body, and I saw her restored to full glory in the most beautiful, and everybody was crying, and I was looking at her, and I had the biggest smile as I saw her restored to glory in the most beautiful way. It was the most breathtaking thing I'd ever seen. Most breathtaking thing I'd ever seen. And I sat straight up in my bed, and it was so shocking. I ran to my phone and I immediately called her mother. Immediately called her mother, who's one of her caretakers. And I said, I'm just checking in. And I didn't tell her the full extent of what I saw and the way that I saw it. But I said, I saw you wearing an orange shirt. And she said, oh my God, that's my favorite color. And I said, you were wearing the most beautiful orange shirt I had ever seen. You were wearing an orange garment. Oh, and I just think about the joy on my face. I was blinded by her. I can't even, the word beauty is an understatement. We don't have a word in language for what I saw. The closest I can get you to is majestic beauty. And I saw her going from being this sick cancer patient, dwindling away, to this majestic and most beautiful being I've ever seen. In the twinkling of an eye, literally, I watched it. And I saw two perspectives, Melina. I saw the perspective here of the family grieving and weeping, everybody crying. And I saw her saying, I'm okay. I'm beautiful. And I was so taken by what I was saying here, I couldn't even look anymore at the family. I couldn't even look because it was breathtaking to see what I was seeing. So I had that. That was literally 10 days ago. You know, why was I shown that? I don't know. I don't know why I was shown that. But I was. And I'm so grateful.
Mm.
I'm so grateful. And I hope that I remember that on my journey. And, when we have loved ones that pass, I want to remember that moment because let me tell you something. That moment was so awe-inspiring. There was no weeping. There was no weeping because it was so awe-inspiring. And I've never been so joyful. You would think somebody's dying. You'd be, oh God, Lord. I was so joyful. And I said, how could I be so joyful? But all that there was, from what I saw, was perfection. See, we don't get that in the human experience. We get the human thing. Oh, we so sad. We're not going to make it. From that perspective.
So, Darnella, would you say that these experiences actually changed the way you understood spirituality or religion?
Absolutely. Well, for one, I understood uh, so much of religion, not to offend anybody, but is a lot of indoctrination and dogma and things that we're taught because, your grandmama believed it, your mama, your grandmama, it's the institution. It's the institution and it's the conformity, and everybody who belongs to this group must have the same unified thinking. That's what makes us this group. But honestly, everything I've seen has been outside of what I've been taught. And I mean, I was very devout. I've been very devout to three religions, Baptist, Catholicism, and Buddhism. I've been very devout to this thing that you would call the Bible. Have read most of it, have studied it. I used to give Bible talks when I was 14 years old. I'd give talks. I was going to be a missionary. I go knock on people's doors and talk about the Bible. So I've been a very devout student. But I feel like at this time in my life, based on what I've experienced, like nothing that I've seen leaves any room for religion for me on any level. And that's not to take away the good that comes from everything. Everything has some good in it, right?
Mhm.
Everything has some good in it, right? Someone follows Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, whatever, Baha'i faith. Everything has something good, some good in it. But from what I have seen, Melina, in my consciousness, I can't fit it now down into a group. I just can't, it won't fit there anymore because I feel like I've seen more. I've seen beyond the white yonder, so to speak,
Right.
you know? But that doesn't take away from the value that people get. If people get value out of that, community is important and you have a strong community, then God bless you, do your thing. I
Yeah.
just feel like fear, judgment, and condemnation is what I grew up with in the institution of religion. And I'm hoping that I had completed my cycle of soul cycle with those things. Because I don't ever need to be condemned or made to feel like I'm a sinner and I'm unworthy or unclean. A lot of the judgment, I have no more use for that. No more use for that. So in that respect, it's changed this paradigm of how I see the world and myself in regards to religion.
It really does sound nice and it sounds peaceful.
Yeah, very peaceful. Because I lived in a lot of fear, a lot of fear. I was always afraid of being destroyed. Oh my God, you don't do the right thing, you're going to be destroyed. Oh Lord. And that kept me in line for a long time, but it kept me in line for the wrong motivation. I wasn't in line because I wanted to be in line. I was in line because I didn't want to die. It's a big difference. It's a big difference of why I was walk the line, right? And I don't want to walk the line. I don't want to walk any line anymore because I feel like I'm afraid I'm going to be annihilated. And anything that brings you a system of annihilation, I can never be a participant of that ever again.
Absolutely.
Because from what I know of myself, I cannot die. From what I know of myself, right? Even when the body dies,
Mhm.
this eternal light goes on without end.
And where do you think that is? Where do we think that is, just from your opinion? And since you brought that up, where, if we don't die, and our body does, we know that, but we don't die, where do we go?
Yeah, that isn't that the $1 million question? That's a $1 billion question. I
Mhm.
believe, from what I have seen, I believe we return, and it just makes sense to me. We return to sender. We return to that which sent us forth. It just makes sense. Now, where do we go from there? Are we reabsorbed back into the great collect? You know, I believe that I mean honestly, what I believe is that we carry the we carry the narrative of these lifetimes for as long as we need them. It's the story, right? The personality. But I believe that that's never fully lost, but I believe we do discard of it at a certain point. I believe because we don't need it. We don't need our story and our religion and our labels and all of our stuff that we have here. So I believe that we go back into the light. We go back to that which sent us and we regroup, we revamp, we acclimate, congregate, and we bring all that we have amassed from this lifetime and we blend it into the totality of everything that we've ever been. And I believe that it remains a piece and a part and a parcel of this massive soul that we are. I believe ultimately everything goes back to source, whatever that is. I think it is beyond human understanding. Even us attempting to try to discuss it and dialogue about it, is we've already lost the essence of what it is. It cannot be named, described. It could only be experienced. It is beyond language. And I believe ultimately that we go back to that and we are reabsorbed by the universe itself. That's what I believe. But that's
Thank
just my belief.
Mhm. I love hearing different beliefs. I ask that
Yeah.
always. I just love to
Yeah.
hear what people have to say. So after everything that you've experienced beyond the body, what do you now believe is the most important thing a human being can do while they're here on?
Thank you for that. I think it's the question that I ask myself every day. And I would like to believe I am never going to be mature enough to give you a full, direct 100%. This is absolutely what I believe. I would say it's ever changing, ever growing, ever shifting. Once upon a time ago, I believe the most important thing I could have ever done with my life was to become successful and share my stories with the world and get my work out there. Then I believe the most important thing I could have ever done is have a child. Then the most people fall in love. It keeps changing. But what I do believe today, if you were to ask me on March 10th, 2026, is that for me to most important thing that you can do is to know who you are beyond name and form, to remember the self, the original self, and to integrate the highest potential of that into the human life that you're living, and to demonstrate this thing called God through the daily life.
Mm.
And it's your vote. I always say people make a big deal about voting, but it's not about voting every 4 years. It's about voting every day for the choices that you make. That's the most important vote you will ever cast.
Mhm.
Who you choose to be in the moment, how you choose to show up in the world, if you choose to honor yourself or not, taking accountability for what you're creating and how you're living your life. I think the most important thing I can do right now is just return to me. Is really return. What does that mean, return to you, Darnella? It means before I had a name that anybody could call me by, I was something. I was something, some form of intelligent awareness. And if I can just touch the hem of that garment of the truth of who I am when the story ends, that's evolution, that's learning, that's self awareness. So for me, one of the most important things I can do now is try to become aware of myself, my habits, my patterns, catch myself in my own addictions. We all have them. Deal with my mental health, my own mental drama, because the human loves drama. We love drama. We live for the conflict of the human experience. So each day to seek balance, each day to seek balance. And to, I would say the most urgent and pressing thing that people can do nowadays is invest in their mental health.
Yeah.
Let not a day go by that you don't assess your mental health. We should be assessing our mental health every day, every single day, like you assess your hydration levels. Every day we should be checking in on this right here. What are we thinking? What are we believing in? What are we turning our energy over to? What are we focusing? What are we hyper focusing on? And is it healthy? And sometimes we're more imbalanced than others. Sometimes I'm much more imbalanced than I am in others. Sometimes I tip completely out of balance.
Mhm.
And, having a consistent spiritual practice keeps you better, your ability to better be in balance, right? So I start my day off with yoga and meditation and chanting, and I have things that I do on a daily that are designed to bring me back from getting off kilter, so to speak.
Beautiful. So, Darnella, before we wrap up, I like to give the guests a moment to share their work. You've spent many, many years exploring these experiences and sharing what you've learned. So, would you be able to talk to us about your teachings, programs, published works, and where people can
Oh,
contact you?
thank you so much. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I want to say I always carry a book with me because I never leave home without
Mine.
the next
So
breath.
that got me off. That's a good book.
Yeah, I
Oh yeah.
wrote this. I wrote this, and it took me 4 years to write this book. This is one of the things I'm most proud of. I wrote it after a dear friend and a student I was mentoring ended his life in 2021, and I was there when they pulled him out of the bathroom. He'd hung himself, and it really tipped me into imbalance for quite a while, deep depression and sadness. So this book was about catching your breath after heartbreaking loss, and I talk about a lot of my out of body journeys in this book. I talk about life, death, birth, transition, change, crises. So it's called The Next Breath, Life After Loss. This is a very important piece of work that I really feel like if you're a human being, you'll need this book at some point in your life. My website is journeytoworthy.org, and that's just, to journey, T-O, worthy.org. People can email me, reach out. I do private sessions, one-on-one sessions. I work with people. I scan biofields. I help people ground. I help them through transitions, crises. I also too work with my non-physical team. So I get input from the other side of the veil to help people. So all of that is really uh important part of my work. And I do healing retreats. So if anybody's inspired to connect with me on my website, send an email. I do retreats as well. So we just see where the spirit, I always say I see where the spirit blows me, and that's where I go. Literally.
And we'll have all that information in the description box below. And you're
Thank
not
you.
done yet. You're not off the hook. So on this show, we say often when someone crosses beyond the limits of ordinary awareness, they return with the truth. So Darnella, after leaving the body and returning again and again, what is the one universal truth you have brought back that you think humanity needs to hear right now?
Oh my God. I can tell you it's my brain is dividing into 4 or 5 different places right now. But I want to say this, you are never separated from this thing that you would call spirit or God or that which you consider to be greater than yourself. Life can never be divided. So you never are truly divided. And therefore, be clear in the actions that you take because you can never be separated from the things that you do. They remain an integral and an infinite part of your expression. So make sure that the echo of everything that you put out is something that you want, one, coming back, amplified, and something that you feel that you'd be proud to witness when you look at your life review. And we will all have one that you will be proud of what you have put out and how you directed your life energy. That's the greatest thing I could tell people. If you only knew that one day you would be everything you'd ever done, if you only knew that one day you would be everything you have ever done, what would you do different? That changed my life right there. One simple teaching. One teaching. I am everything I've ever done. So walk gently, walk kindly.
Beautiful.
That's what I would say.
Darnella, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you. It meant a lot to me to be here. You don't even know how much. Just to give me a platform and an opportunity to share. You know, may God continue to bless my body, temple, and my mind. It's give to me opportunities like this to share with the world. That's my prayer. So thank you for opening your offering me a seat at your table. I do not take it lightly, nor do I ever take it for granted. So thank you, Melina. Thank you.
And I just wanted to tell you that your story reminds us that awakening doesn't have to come through a single moment beyond the veil, but
Right.
through many journeys and many returns. And I
Absolutely.
want to thank you for returning to yourself over and over and
Yeah.
over again and bringing your light, your wisdom, your truth here to all of us on the return.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Melina.
And to everyone watching or listening, today's conversation reminds us that consciousness may be greater than what we experience through the physical. But what matters is not just this journey, but is how we keep returning to who we truly are.
Mm.
Thank you for watching. And until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within.
That was excellent.